1800s, at the turn of the century, my maternal grandmother, Maddalena Cavana, had a ristorante pensione in the Bellagio area of northern Italy. And they had a lot of tourists, patrons from all over the world, and surprisingly a lot from the U.S. And they loved her food. You know, coffee is an interesting experience in Italy because northern Italian coffee is very, very different than the coffee down south. And because of the culinary and the cuisine there, the coffee kind of matches that. And she was very proud of her coffee, and at least I'm told that. And she noticed that Americans in particular drank what we would call a latte today. And so she decided to concoct this dessert coffee. And she put Belgian chocolate and a couple of liqueurs, which was heretical in Italy because you never put anything in coffee there, and whipped cream. And she called the drink Caffe D'Amore con un bacio, the coffee of love with a kiss. Well, it was an immediate sensation, and people just loved it, particularly Americans. And in, I think it was 1925, she emigrated to the U.S., and she opened restaurants in Boston, Mass, and Revere Beach, Mass, and Durham, Connecticut. And this was her specialty drink, her house drink. And it was very, very popular in all the years that she had those restaurants. Well, Maddalena was very interesting. I mean, when you consider those years and the idea of here was a woman who, the story of her husband who went to World War I and never came back, I mean, that's an interesting part. But she had to, therefore, bring up these two daughters, and she did it by really coming to the States and opening these businesses, and became very successful. They always called her Madame, the Madame Maddalena, and she really made a name for herself. Her restaurants in the States were called Cavanas, Cavanas in Boston and Cavanas in Revere Beach. I think in Durham that had a different name, Durham Inn, I think it was called. But she was really a special lady, and I remember her as my remembrance of her was when our first child, we drove to Connecticut to visit her. She was retired. First thing she did was she grabbed my 2-year-old daughter and took off. And my wife said, "Where's she going?" And she said, "Well, she's going to show her around Connecticut." So that was the type of woman. She was a woman, the very, very special woman for her time. Well, in the 1960s, late actually 1968, I had a friend of mine who was a writer, and we were doing some projects together. And he was from New Jersey, and I'm originally from Massachusetts. So he said, "You know, this town, Pasadena, California, they need a delicatessen. The food here is terrible." And I said, "Well, look, you're a writer, you have the time, why don't you open one?" And he said, no, we can do it together. So we embarked on this project, and in between our time doing what we were doing for a living, we managed to open this little delicatessen. We call it Stottlemeyer's. We felt that it had to be a German delicatessen, but we really agonized over finding the name because everything sounded like Hitler's delicatessen. So Mel Stottlemeyer was our inspiration, and we called it Stottlemeyer's. But in this process, the thing became very successful. Actually, we had political sandwiches, we had sandwiches we named, and it was really popular. But he went to England to write for the BBC, and we needed someone to run the store, and my wife took over. And she really expanded the business from what was a sandwich shop originally. She had made it into a full delicatessen. So Eva had created this instant version and of what was inspired by my grandmother's drink, original drink. And we called it Caffe D'Amore, in the American pronunciation. And it was an immediate success. Before we knew it, the product was in over 300 restaurants and hotels. It was in the Club 333 at Disneyland, and some very, very exclusive locations. So it really had a life of its own. My partner is Chris Julius. He's our CEO and senior partner. He got involved because my wife wanted to retire and spend time with the grandchildren. Chris has brought his business acumen, he has a long, long history in business, and with his vision of how to open up these markets. We've built our company really on education, on the idea of how to be of service, because we have a passion for food, passion for culinary, because we consider ourselves to be really a culinary type product. It's like Italian cooking, and Italian food is really, they take great pride in it, and we do too. So that's our story. I started in what is known today as the golden age of television. I had the good fortune, I was cast from a play down in the La Jolla Playhouse and was put into 20th Century Fox, and I was still in college. I was going into my senior year at USC, and they put me in this picture, and before I knew it, I was just working. I did 3 Twilight Zones. I was very fortunate in that there was a casting director, Ethel Winan for CBS, who cast me in a Playhouse 90. In fact, I ended up doing 3 Playhouse 90s. And she put me in Twilight Zone, which is really that. I think that of all of the things that I did, the Twilight Zones, and I guest starred in Star Trek the first season, invariably people still run up, and I get fan mail and so forth. Figure, want some cocoa?